Hello. Welcome to an explanation of the Gifted and Talented program at MSAD 46. My name is Matt Drewette-Card. I am the curriculum coordinator for the district as well as the Gifted and Talented coordinator for the school district. So what does it mean for a student to be gifted and talented? According to the National Association for Gifted Children, students with gifts and talents perform or have the capability to perform at higher levels compared to others of the same age, experience, and environment in one or more domains. What does it mean for students to perform at higher levels? When we're talking higher levels, we mean things that the learning should be deeper, more complex. The level of challenge should be appropriate to what the student can do. They should be engaging, maybe relevant and authentic to what the student is interested in. The teachers and the higher levels mean being personalized at the individual level. However, it also means that they are still aligned to the same content that's in the standards. So if they are working at a eighth grade science standard, the higher level, the depth and complexity that's there should still be aligned to that standard. We're not doing something different. We're doing the same thing, just more complex. When we talk higher levels, what they are not are things like additional homework. They're not more chapters to read. They're not, hey, solve 30 more problems at night. Um, Higher levels doesn't mean, okay, you get to be a teacher's assistant in the classroom. It doesn't mean saying if you're working at an eighth grade level science standard, we're going to bump that up to the ninth grade standard. It doesn't mean that. Or just saying, well, we're going to do different standards for you. We're going to treat you differently. That's not what it's about. So it's more about the depth and complexity and the appropriateness of challenge engagement for meeting those learners. So at MSAD 46, who can be identified as gifted and talented? It's an important question. Any student from grades 3 through 12 can be identified as gifted and talented. It can go through the process of being identified as gifted and talented. We start the process in grades 3. Uh, One of the reasons for that is because to make sure that over the K2 years, they're building up some more strengths, competencies, etc. It is we have a more full picture, especially when it comes to using our universal screeners and assessments like the NWEA, which we use. And what about content area? Well, any student can be identified and gifted and talented in any content area. We are a unique district in this way, in that we don't just identify in either ELA or mathematics, but in science and social studies and music and visual art and technology and PE and health along the way as well, so that we can honor, celebrate, and acknowledge the various gifts and strengths and talents that may be embedded or may be had by our incredibly talented pool of students. So, how does a student become identified in gifted and talented? It's a multi-tiered process that we follow along and is aligned to both best practices and the requirements through the rules as set up by the Maine Department of Education. In order for there to be identification, there has to be two sets of data that are involved. There has to be what's called quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is more your typical assessment type data, more numbers, more hard data in that way. And qualitative is more observational, more anecdotal, even. So in MS 8046, how we do all of this in terms of the various content areas. You'll see it for English language arts, math, and science. What we will do is we will look at a 3-year average of the NWEA. The student should be performing at a 3-year average of greater than or equal to the 95th percentile, as well as the COGAT assessment, a composite score of greater than or equal to 90th percentile. The NWEA measures reading, mathematics, language usage, and science. The COGAT, which is an assessment that it measures more similar but in different ways, more about problem solving and cognitive demand, cognitive problem solving, and complexity, etc. They do a verbal, a nonverbal, and a quantitative approach to it. So it's not necessarily just about knowing math facts, it's about knowing how to problem solve. From there, from those scores, from those quantitative data, we then, if those meet the criteria, then what we will do is we will contact that student's teacher for the content area or content areas where they might be eligible based on the data, and have them complete a content-based scoring rubric. These are all available to look at on the curriculum page of aos94.org. Now, for social studies, technology, visual arts, music, and PE and health, we do things a little bit differently because we don't have the universal type screener for for those content areas. So instead, what happens is a student will usually get referred, and from that referral, we'll go through a teacher scoring rubric. We'll start with the qualitative side of things, and if the criteria are met, to go from there to meet the uh, the criteria for advancing to the next level, we'll then administer the COGAT, either the full COGAT or the shorter screening COGAT. And again, the student must meet the 90th percentile, greater than or equal to the 90th percentile. With those two pools of data, we can then say there's enough evidence to warrant having a gifted and talented meeting. But let's talk about the COGAT just a little bit more, because the COGAT is widely used as a means for gifted and talented screening and for gifted and talented identification. Prior to 2023, the 2022-2023 school year, the COGAT screening only happened when a student was referred for potential gifted and talented identification. What would happen is we would go through that process that I just showed you of the teacher scoring rubric, the one on the bottom there for social studies. We would do that for every content area. But in the 2022-2023 school year, we changed our process, and all students in grades 3 and 7 were administered the COGAT. So we did it as a universal screener. We chose those two grade levels because grade 3 wanted to start off elementary to see where we're at with the student so we could maybe do early identification. But we also wanted to screen again in grade 7 because sometimes gifts and talents manifest at different times and in different ways over the course of from going from elementary school into middle level. For this last year, 23-24, we updated that to be grades 4 and 7, just to give a little bit more of a buffer for the grades 3, since there was also a lot of other assessments that happen in grades 3. Now, if a student, if a teacher or a parent or an administrator or a student themselves believes that they might be eligible for gifted and talented identification, they can still be individually referred at any grade level and at any content area. Just because we are doing a universal screener at grades 4 and at 7 does not mean that an individualized referral cannot happen, and we will still administer and go through the process from there. After the data is collected from the COGAT, the NWEA, if applicable, and the teacher scoring rubrics, if all the scores are meeting the required criteria, then the gifted and talented coordinator will reach out to the students' caregivers, teachers, and building administrators to set up what's called a gifted and talented identification meeting. At this meeting, the team will discuss the data, the team will discuss the student, and determine whether or not to identify the student as gifted and talented in one or more content areas. If the identification process is determined, they say, yes, we want to identify them in this area, then the gifted and talented coordinator will help navigate the team through determining what might those supports, accommodations, tools, goals to help the student. It's important to recognize that in MSAD 46, there is no pull-out program for gifted and talented students. There is no gifted and talented coach or gifted and talented teacher. Um, as a result, the differentiation and the challenges, or the differentiation that happens, and the means by which a teacher challenges the students, is what I was trying to say, happens at the individual classroom level, and the classroom teachers are responsible for that differentiation. This is where a lot of communication has to happen in between parents and teachers, teachers and parents, and if things are not being challenged enough, then they need to have that conversation. And if the plan is written or not done enough to continue to engage and challenge the student at levels appropriate, then the gifted and talented coordinator can come in and redesign or rework the plan to make sure that it's actually going to meet the needs of the student. Every spring, the team should convene to uh, discuss what worked or what didn't work or what changes should be made to the plan for the next school year. If the plan is changed, then the gifted and talented coordinator will then collect those data, change the plan accordingly, and then once the new teachers have been assigned for that student, share out the new plan. Prior to 2023, the 2022-2023 school year, COGAT screening only happened when a student was referred as a potential gifted and talented identification. We changed that for the 2022-23 school year so that two grade levels, grades 3 and 7, were fully administered the full COGAT assessment as a universal screener. We chose two grade levels, one in elementary, one in middle level, as we want to try to identify students early on that might have gifts and talents so we can help intervene earlier, but also recognizing that gifts and talents can manifest at different times. For the 2023-2024 school year and beyond, we are changing that to grades 4 and 7 to help support not over assessing, not over testing kids, as sometimes in grades 3 they have different assessments too. This does not mean that students at other grade levels, grade 5, grade 9, etc., they can still be referred. A student can be individually referred at any grade level in any content area, and then if they meet the required criteria, those students will be screened, and then we can go from there. So what happens next? What happens next with the process is if all of the scores, the quantitative and the qualitative data, meet those criteria, the gifted and talented coordinator will reach out to the students' caregivers, teachers, and building administrators to set up a gifted and talented identification meeting. At this meeting, team members will discuss the assessment and teacher scoring data to make a determination about identifying the student as gifted and talented in one or more content areas. If a student is then identified in one or more content areas, the gifted and talented coordinator will guide the team to creating various accommodations and goals to help guide the student's classroom teachers in appropriately differentiating instruction for the student. It is important to understand that at this time in MSAD 46, we do not have a gifted and talented pull-out program. We do not have a gifted and talented push-in coach. We do not have a assigned gifted and talented teacher for these students. All differentiation, all gifted and talented teaching and learning happens in the regular education classroom, and it is the role and responsibility of the classroom teachers to make sure that that happens, and it is the role of the building administrator to help oversee that, as they would do with every other instructional process. If during the course of the year there seems to be times when the plan isn't actually working right, or if the plan doesn't actually say what needs to happen, then the gifted and talented coordinator can be contacted to help update the plan, change the plan, as needed. There will be 2 meetings, generally speaking, for the families, for caregivers, teachers, etc., to discuss the gifted and talented plan. One in the spring of the year to discuss what worked, what didn't work, what needs to be changed. If things need to be changed over the course of the summer, or information is gathered, that the gifted and talented coordinator will do those changes, and they will schedule a meeting in the fall for the students' new teachers to discuss the plan and what needs to happen in the individual classroom to support that student. So, once a student is identified, as I mentioned, minimum of 2 meetings per year, classroom teachers should be implementing the accommodations goals to the best of their ability, monitoring progress of students meeting the accommodations or goals, and if any needs arise, contacting the gifted and talented coordinator. That is the Gifted and Talented program at MSAD 46. If you have any questions, please contact the Gifted and Talented coordinator.